Have you ever walked into a room full of people you've known for years, listened to the same jokes, the same complaints, and the same stories, and suddenly felt like an absolute stranger? It is a cold, piercing realization that settles in the chest like a stone. You look at your hands, you hear your own voice responding to a question, but it feels like you are watching a movie of someone else's life. This is not the heavy, suffocating blanket of clinical depression. It is something sharper, something more surgical. It is the quiet, terrifying moment when the glue that held your world together simply stops sticking. You realize that the version of you that used to enjoy these things, the person who cared about the local gossip, the career milestones, or the social approval, has died. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still walking, but with nowhere to call home within your own skin. Most people will tell you that you're just going through a phase, or perhaps that you need a vacation or a new hobby. They want to fix the leak because they are afraid of the flood. But what they won't tell you, because they don't know it themselves, is that this disconnection is not a malfunction. This is not a midlife crisis or a temporary lapse in judgment. This is an awakening. It is the structural integrity of your false self finally giving way under the weight of a truth you've been ignoring for decades. The reason you no longer identify with almost anything is because the you that used to identify with those things was an elaborate construction, a costume designed to survive a world that demands performance over presence. This is not the kind of shallow motivation you find in self-help books that promise you a better version of yourself in 10 easy steps. In fact, most of those books are part of the problem. They teach you how to decorate the cage, how to make the mask more comfortable, or how to optimize your productivity so you don't have time to feel the void. They lie to you because they profit from your desire to return to a normal that was actually killing your soul. What we are discussing here is the opposite of optimization. It is a dismantling. It is a radical, painful, and necessary stripping away of everything that is not essentially you. When you reach this point where the music you used to love sounds like noise, where the ambitions that drove you now feel like chores, and where the people you call friends feel like distant acquaintances from a past life, you are entering a sacred and dangerous territory. It is the desert of the self. And in this desert, there are no maps, only footprints that the wind erases as soon as you step. You feel like you are losing your mind, but in reality, you are losing your chains. For most of your life, your identity was a collection of borrowed parts. You took a bit from your parents' expectations, a bit from the media you consumed, a piece from the professional standards of your industry, and a large chunk from the desperate need to be liked. This composite sketch was what you presented to the world as me. It worked for a while. It got you through school, it helped you navigate relationships, and it provided a sense of safety. But a mask can only be worn for so long before it starts to poison the skin underneath. The moment of awakening begins when the skin starts to itch. It starts with a subtle boredom, a faint sense of, "Is this it?" that eventually grows into a roar of dissatisfaction. You start to see the strings. You see the transactional nature of your social circles. You see the vanity in your pursuits. You see that you have been running a race toward a finish line that doesn't exist. This is the collapse of the persona. It is a terrifying experience because, without the persona, you don't know who you are. If you aren't the successful professional, the loyal friend, the provider, or the fun one, then who are you? The silence that follows that question is where the real work begins. Consider the life of Carl Jung. He was a man of immense stature, a brilliant mind who had reached the pinnacle of his profession. He had everything the world says should make a man feel complete. And yet, in his mid-30s, he fell into a state of profound disorientation. He realized that he had spent his life studying the maps of other people's souls while his own was an uncharted wilderness. He entered a period of his life that he later called his confrontation with the unconscious. He stopped being the prestigious doctor for a moment and became a man who sat on the ground playing with stones, trying to find a connection to his childhood self, to the parts of him that hadn't been colonized by the demands of society. He faced visions and voices that would have led a lesser man to a psychiatric ward. But Jung understood that his breakdown was actually a breakthrough. He wasn't losing his grip on reality. He was losing his grip on a shallow, collective consensus of reality. He realized that the self is not something you build, but something you discover after you've burned down the structures that were blocking your view. He had to become a stranger to his colleagues and even to his own ego to find the core of his being. We live in a culture that is terrified of this kind of emptiness. We are told that if we aren't constantly identifying with something, a political movement, a brand, a lifestyle, a subculture, we are nothing. We are pressured to find ourselves by buying something new or adopting a new set of beliefs. But you cannot find yourself by adding more layers. You find yourself through subtraction. This is what the great philosophers meant when they spoke of the via negativa, the negative path. It is the process of defining what is true by stripping away everything that is false. When you say, I am no longer this, and I am no longer that, you are not becoming empty in a negative sense. You are clearing the space. Think of a sculptor. The statue is already inside the block of marble. The sculptor doesn't add anything to the stone. He removes everything that is not the statue. Your life is the block of marble, and your current state of not identifying is the sound of the chisel hitting the stone. It hurts. It creates a mess. It leaves you feeling diminished. But with every chip that falls away, the true form of your soul becomes more visible. But here is where the path becomes narrow and treacherous. This is the double trap. On one side, there is the abyss of nihilism. When you realize that the world you've lived in is mostly a theater of shadows, it is very easy to fall into the trap of believing that nothing matters. You might think, if my identity was a lie and society is a game, then there is no point to anything. This is a spiritual dead end. It is a form of ego-driven despair that is just as much of a prison as the mask you just took off. On the other side, there is the trap of the new identity. This is perhaps more dangerous. It's when you take your feeling of being awakened and turn it into a new ego trip. You start identifying as someone who is enlightened, awake, or beyond the matrix. You start looking down on the masses who are still asleep. You trade your old suit for a robe, but the person inside hasn't changed. You've just replaced one set of illusions with another, more arrogant one. The true path, the awakening that is actually happening inside you, is much more humble. It is the ability to stand in the middle of the void without needing to fill it immediately with a new label. It is the courage to be nobody for a while. Can you handle being nobody? Can you sit at a dinner table and feel the distance between you and the conversation without feeling superior or inferior? Can you watch your old ambitions die without rushing to invent new ones to distract yourself from the grief? This state of non-identification is a form of fasting. Just as the body heals when it stops consuming food for a period, the psyche heals when it stops consuming identities. You are in a period of psychic digestion. You are processing years of swallowed lies and undigested expectations. This is why you feel tired. This is why you feel like you've lost your edge. You aren't losing your drive. You are losing your false drive. The energy you used to spend maintaining your persona is being pulled back into your core to fuel a much deeper transformation. It is like the stage of the caterpillar in the chrysalis. To the outside world, and even to the caterpillar itself, it looks like a kind of death. The creature literally dissolves into a soup. There is no structure left, no legs, no eyes, no identity. It is a biological chaos. But if the caterpillar tried to hold on to its form, it would never become the butterfly. It must accept the total loss of itself to become what it is meant to be. As this awakening progresses, you will notice a shift in your perception. When you stop trying to be something, you finally start to see things as they are. You begin to notice the beauty in things that have no utility. You see the light hitting a wall, the rhythm of a stranger's walk, the complexity of a leaf. These things don't give you status or success, but they provide a sense of reality that your old life never could. You are moving from a life of having and seeming to a life of being. This is the birth of the observer. You are no longer the actor lost in the play, screaming his lines and worrying about the applause. You are the one who is watching the play. You can still play the role, you still have to work, pay bills, and talk to people, but you are no longer deceived by the performance. You have an internal sanctuary that the world cannot touch. Subscribe to the channel. This internal distance is your greatest strength. It is the beginning of true freedom. Freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. It is the realization that you are not the slave of your own impulses, your own history, or your own ego. Friedrich Nietzsche spoke of the three metamorphoses of the spirit. First, the spirit becomes a camel, carrying the heavy burdens of tradition, morality, and social duty. The camel wanders into the loneliest desert. There, the camel becomes a lion. The lion wants to capture its freedom and be lord of its own desert. It says no to the great dragon of thou shalt. The lion is the stage of rebellion, the stage of not identifying, the stage where you tear down the old values. But the lion is not the end. The lion must still become a child. The child is innocence and forgetting, a new beginning, a game, a self-propelling wheel, a first motion, a sacred yes. Many people get stuck in the lion stage. They spend their lives being against things, being cynical, being detached. But the goal of your current disconnection is to reach the stage of the child, to be able to engage with the world again, but this time from a place of play and choice, not from a place of compulsion and need. You are currently in the desert, transitioning from the camel to the lion. Do not fear the claws. Do not fear the roar. But do not think the desert is your final home. How do you live in the world once the veil has been lifted? You live with a sense of holy indifference. Not an indifference that is cold or cruel, but an indifference to the outcomes that used to haunt you. You do your work because the work itself is a form of expression, not because you need the promotion to feel worthy. You love people for who they are, not for how they make you look or what they can do for you. You become much quieter. You realize that most words are just noise used to fill the silence that people are afraid of. You become comfortable with the "I don't know." When people ask you about your plans, your goals, or your identity, and you respond with a genuine "I'm not sure," they will be uncomfortable. Your lack of a solid mask reflects their own fragility back to them. But you will feel a lightness that they cannot imagine. You are no longer carrying the weight of a ghost. You are no longer trying to keep a dead version of yourself on life support. This awakening is a lonely process, but it is the only way to find true companionship. As long as you were living through a mask, you could only connect with other masks. You weren't being loved. Your performance was being loved. And that is the loneliest feeling in the world, to be cheered for something you are not. When you drop the identification, you may lose many people. In fact, you almost certainly will. The people who were invested in your old persona will feel betrayed. They will try to pull you back. They will use guilt, they will use concern, and they will use ridicule. Let them. Their reaction is proof that you are changing. And in the space left by those who depart, a new kind of connection will eventually emerge. Connections based on truth, not on mutual delusion. You will find others who have also walked through the fire, who have also sat in the desert, and who no longer need to pretend. So, if you find yourself today feeling like a ghost in your own life, if you look at the great prizes of society and feel nothing but a faint sense of absurdity, do not turn away. Do not try to fix the problem by jumping into a new relationship, a new career, or a new ideology. Sit with the emptiness. Let the old structures collapse. It is a painful process because the ego is being dismantled, and the ego is convinced that it is you. It will scream. It will tell you that you are failing, that you are becoming nothing. Agree with it. Tell the ego, yes, I am becoming nothing. Because only when you are nothing are you finally free to be everything. The awakening is not a destination you reach. It is the end of the traveler who was trying to get somewhere. You are not going anywhere. You are finally arriving where you have always been, but were too busy to notice. The world hasn't changed, but the one who looks at the world has. And that, in the end, is the only revolution that matters. You are not losing your life. You are finally allowing your life to live you. The silence you hear is not the absence of sound. It is the beginning of a different kind of music. It is the sound of a soul that has finally stopped screaming for attention and has started to listen. Can you hear it? What is left of you when you have no story to tell? What remains when you no longer need to be anyone at all? Stay in that question. Don't look for an answer. The answer is a trap. The question is the key.